Welcome to case study video number 13. We are going to pick up this image where we finished with it previously, which was a focus stack of 3 images from front to back, and we also cropped it down to a 4x5. Now, I said at the time that we were going to pick this image up again and take it into Photoshop and see what else we could do with it. Now, we are in the final stages, so realistically, when we open this image in Photoshop, we have as much choice and freedom as we could possibly want. There is no set way to work this file. There is no predetermined way to work it. What I want to do is take this and use it to show a viewer my representation of this scene, which does 2 things. One is it shows a beach on the west of Scotland looking down towards the western part of Torridon and the Scottish coast. But secondly, I want it to demonstrate to that viewer something of the mood and the energy and the emotions that I was feeling while I was there. It's a remote place. It's taken us a while to get there, carrying heavy sacks across wet and boggy ground, and we were alone. We had the place to ourselves. And, this is partially demonstrated by a very bare scene. We've got an empty beach with no footprints on it, or no rubbish, or no boats or anything out in this image at all to show that there's anyone who has ever been there. And really it's a case of using this file to just portray something of the scene. The second thing we want to do is use the natural flow of the image, so the way these trails of sand and shells have been dragged back by the receding tide, to lead the eye through the frame to these mountains in the background, and then the way the clouds are kind of cradling over the top of the frame. I feel it might be nice to darken this foreground area to lead the eye through it. So we're now in Photoshop, and I want to demonstrate a few techniques that I would typically use to work my files. Now, I don't like this left-hand side. For some reason, we have left a bit of the previously blended file in there, so we can see a little bit of irregularity on there. So the very, very first thing I want to do is move this in with the crop tool and we want to keep it in the 4:5 ratio. Otherwise, we are going to start amending the way the file looks. So there we go. That's fine as far as I'm concerned now, and it's also got rid of a little bit of that left side, which I didn't like anyway. Right. Once we start looking at files in Photoshop, there's 2 things we want to do. We want to look at the tonal consistency in terms of whether the top of the file really looks like it goes with the bottom of the file, and in this case they pretty much do. I wouldn't want to darken the sky too much further. I mean, we have a very simple gradient, so we could quite easily create a curve, darken that down quite significantly, and then we have a mask already on the adjustment layer. So with our gradient tool, should we wish, we could darken that sky and leave the foreground a little brighter. Now that looks okay. I don't have any major problems with that. It's certainly starting to enhance the moodiness of that top section. What I want to do is highlight some of this flow. So with the lasso tool, we can draw a simple selection through here, which we can add another adjustment layer to, and let's create a bit of visual contrast. Now obviously that looks like a real mess, so we need to refine the mask with a feather. We are going to Command H to hide those marching ants, and then use that feather tool to blend that into the foreground. Now that's created quite a strange look, and we have changed the color of that foreground, so we will change the blending mode from normal to luminosity. And what we've done now is we've added contrast, but we've kept the color from the original file. You'll notice now we have two curves layers. Let's call the first one darken sky, and let's call the second one flow contrast. Now these can be named anything you like. I personally call my layers fairly descriptively to tell myself what they are doing. That for me very clearly tells me, and I can see from the mask, what area of the file we're looking at. There is no right or wrong in terms of how we process this file. What I would like to do is add a vignette, and the easiest way to do that is to use the ellipse tool, draw it down in an elliptical shape, or any shape you like. It can be a circular vignette or a very elongated vignette. We need to go Command Shift I to invert that selection, or alternatively you can go Select Inverse. And we now create another curves adjustment layer. We set the blending mode to multiply, which looks pretty dark and ominous, but again we need to refine the mask. Control H to hide the marching ants, feather it, and you want a fairly significant feather for these, otherwise you end up with a clear shape. You want to diffuse that really quite significantly, and then click OK. If we feel that that is too dark, we can then dial down the opacity, or if we wish, we can say that's got too dark, and we can use a black brush at 38%, make it nice and large with a very low softness, and just paint it out a touch. And that way we've not overly darkened that, but we've vignetted the foreground, which again, I feel vignettes are a nice way to create a diffused frame. The edges of the frame are very harsh, they're very angular, and they're very definite, whereas a vignette creates a softer transition from the central part of the image, which is our focus, from this little shape in the foreground through these areas to the background. It's created a much more diffused, so I will call that layer Vignette. And we now have 3 adjustment layers. Now, something I do like to do quite often is create a group that I call All Adjustments. And we select 1, 2, 3 layers, holding down the Shift key, drag them into that All Adjustments layer, which we can now open and close independently. And you can turn the adjustments on and off. Now, for saying we left this file at the end of the focus stack, at a situation where it didn't look too bad in its own right, we are now in a position where after just 3 very, very simple steps, we have created a file that has significantly more punch and contrast and attack, I would say, for want of a better word. This is certainly looking very moody, and I think for now we'll leave it at that. In the next video, number 14, case study number 14, I'm just going to do a little work with very select local adjustments, and that will bring the course to a close for now. So I think at the end of this stage, with our the 3 adjustments that we've made, we can call that the end of case study number 13, and I will see you in the next video.